when I think of a man's emotion, I imagine the ocean and how on the surface it might appear to be calm and blue, but underneath there's a lot going on. Let's just say on the surface, pretend everything is okay, pretend that we're strong, but really that's not what's happening.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Below the Surface podcast. It is me, your host, Kudakwashim Shaike. I'm really excited to come to you today because I'm talking about something that's really fundamental to our lives as people. Not only as men, I know this is a podcast for men, but this is fundamental to our lives as human beings, as people that are living in a social experiment, which is life. I think it became very important to me to talk about this because I've seen how understanding this has really transformed my own personal life. And I think these subjects, I've been looking for them for a very long time, to see them being talked about outside on other people's podcasts or YouTube channels or whatever. But I just never really found them. And it was really hard for me to find resources that were helpful in my own personal growth as a person, until I realized that maybe I needed to be the one doing that. I needed to be the change I wanted to see. So I think the journey for me has been quite interesting, like doing this podcast, because I really want to produce content that is not, that content is not produced just for people. It's for me as well. I'm learning as I'm doing this as well. And I'm really speaking to myself as well through the process. Some artists, have said that make art that is essentially for you, and in that it will also have value to other people. So that's the same concept and mindset that I'm trying to carry in doing this work. So I hope it relates. You can relate to it. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you like it. And I hope it informs you. I hope it becomes something that informs your whole life. And I hope you can follow and like this podcast and share with your friends and family, that they can also benefit from the things that we've been talking about. The topic I'm going to share today is something that we have done before for the people that have been following us and were part of the meetups. So one of the things that we did in the pandemic, when we realized that a lot of people are feeling alone and left out, especially men, because we don't really be engaging in things that are deeper, because society has told us that we can't do that. So one of the things that I started doing was I started this meetup so we could all get together. And one of the things that we're talking about were, how do we begin this conversation about vulnerability from a way that people can understand, but from a way that makes sense, especially in the depth of the pandemic where people were struggling with mental health. And one of the things that was very powerful and that stood out to me was talking about, how do we get to even subjects of self-growth or personal growth? I needed to understand what was the foundation of all that work. What was the foundation? What were we trying to do? And at the end of the day, what were we changing when we say which we're growing personally? And I think it couldn't be much further, or it couldn't be much more than changing the self. So today we're going to talk about the self, which is, I think, the essence of who we are, and I think the foundation for everything that we do in our lives. It informs everything. So, but before we get into talking about the self, I want to define it first. Like I always like defining things, because that is what helps us begin the conversation. There's no conversations without a definition. So the self is the story that you've told yourself about yourself. That's basically the definition of the self. It is what defines who you are, what defines the center from which you work from. I personally define it as I define it as a well. I like to think of it as a well. I always like to think of things in images. It is a well from which the water of your life flows from. It is the well in which it really either is dry or is fruitful and full of water that then pours out to everything else in your life. It is the center and the core that informs everything else, the self. And so before this episode, we were talking about the authentic self, which is an extension of the self, which is a form of the self that is informed by your true core. By definition, your authentic self is everything, is you when we remove notions of what people have told you about yourself, when we remove expectations of other people that have informed how you are and how you show up in space. It's the true you without all the expectations that society has on you. It's the true you without the things that you grew up hearing from your mom that you are not capable of doing something, hearing from someone who hurt you, someone who disappointed you, a boyfriend that cheated on you, a girlfriend that cheated on you, all of that stuff removed is you, is the authentic you. And so in this conversation today, I'm going to be trying to acknowledge all those experiences and how they affect our lives. But most importantly, to talk about how do we reclaim those stories of ourselves that are true about ourselves. But also, I want to show how not having the true story of who you are, how that can affect you in the rest of your life, and why then it becomes very important that we're very clear on the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves. So yeah, the first thing I'm going to do is show the problems of the philosophy of having a non-informed or ill-informed sense of self. So an ill-informed sense of self becomes a problem because most of the time, if you're not operating from an authentic place, then you will ruin everything. You will ruin every part of your life. It is like having an image of yourself that is not very clear. That's another way of looking at the self. The self is essentially, at the core, it's an image of who you are. It's the things that you think you are, this thing that you believe you are. And so if they're projected on a screen and that screen is blurred, if you think, for example, that you're a killer and you believe that you're a killer, and when you're not a killer, when you're a person who is full of peace, if you believe that you're a killer, you go out there and you kill. Imagine how that will affect yourself and your sense of self. Imagine how that will affect a day after your killing. That will definitely bring you down and affect your life. But I feel like that's a very extreme example, right? But the elements of these things that happen on the daily in our lives, we may believe that maybe we're not worthy of love. We may believe that no one will ever love us or no one will ever appreciate us. And because we have that belief and we're carrying it around in all the places we're going, whatever we end up doing actually then further informs that from a negative perspective. It further adds on to that. It exemplifies it. You now, because you already have a mindset that I'm not lovable, when you get into a relationship and maybe someone hurts you, because people are going to hurt you anyway, because that's just the way of life, right? But you may take that to mean that, yeah, of course, now I am that thing. That is the problem. That's the first problem of like not having a clear sense of like who you are. You act from a place that is not true to who you are, which can be quite have negative consequences, as you can tell from this example that I just gave. But another fundamental thing about it is that it causes a lot of pain. It causes a lot of pain in that, like, in Self-Concepts, a book that was written by Dr. Phil, he talks about how people will go through a lot of pain and loneliness. Loneliness can be a result of an ill self-concept, an ill understanding of yourself and who you are. And so that can affect and render everything negatively around you and cause a sense of loneliness, a sense of feeling that you're alone, a sense of feeling that no one will ever be able to understand you, because even you don't understand yourself. So how else can somebody else understand you? Then this is how it then becomes very important for us to understand what it is that is the self. And the third thing that I wanted to showcase there is that the other problem that ends up happening is that we're all created for a purpose. Our lives have a purpose. And these purposes are really tied very closely to our area of giftings, to the things that we're able to do, to the things that we were created to do. So imagine if you have an ill self-concept or don't understand your true worth and you think you're not worthy, then you're going to render everything in your life is unworthy and you're not able to carry on your purpose. So you're living below your means, you're living below your abilities, you're living below what you can be. Someone once said and said it precisely, that we are what we believe we can be. Imagine everything that is going on in your life right now, everything that's surrounding you, everything that if you look left and right, everything you see, everything it was built by you because you believed. And you can only build up to the level of belief about yourself. So clearly, I think you can see how important it is then to have a clear understanding of yourself, because it then aligns with your purpose in life. It then really shows you who you are and what you're meant to be. But it also shows you your area of giftings. It makes you acknowledge your skills. It makes you acknowledge the things that your passions, the things that you value. Like we talked about values 2 weeks ago, and we talked about why it's important to live an authentic life. We talked about that last week. And so putting it all together in this episode, you can see how all these things become very important when we talk about the self. And so how do we do this? And I think this episode is going to be slightly different, right? Like from the other episodes I've done, because the other episodes I've done, it's been me talking about the different subjects and how we can do that. This is going to be you-centered. I cannot tell you who yourself is. Only you can tell you who you is. But one of the things that I can give you in this episode, which I'm hopefully hoping to do, is that I can give you a skill of how do you begin that work of understanding who you are at your core, yourself, your actual self. And it's going to require a lot of you being very honest with yourself, first of all. So I'm going to make a call to action right now, right off the bat, that I want you to be honest with yourself and promise yourself to be honest with yourself. Interesting how we're using self. I'm sorry, I don't know if you're hearing that noise. There's a lot of noise in the background. But you're going to need to be honest with yourself. That's the first thing. And the second thing is I need you to have a journal with you, somewhere where you can write. Normally, this is a session that we do in a group setting where we're working together, journaling together as men. But since this is something that I'm speaking directly to you, I'm hoping that you can also be part of this thing, because we cannot all be in one room, given, the limitations of space and the limitations of time. But if wherever you are, if you have a place to write, get something to write on, and put yourself in a mindset of whatever you're going to write. The third thing is I want it to be a fact. Don't write opinions about what you think or what somebody else has told you. Everything that you're going to write down, I want you to question it. You can offer, for example, say, I am unworthy of love. That is an example. There's a lot of people who have believed that. A lot of people I've talked to who have personally believed that. That's for example, a self-concept that we can hold and carry along on our rest of our lives. But today, since we're doing work to understand deeper of like what that self is, I want us to really question everything that comes out to mind. So the first step that we're going to do is we're just going to write down everything that comes to mind about who you are. And a cautionary note, don't write down, I'm a software engineer. When people ask us, who are you? People usually say, I'm a software engineer, or they talk about their careers. They talk about what they do. They say, I'm a student, I'm a whatever. That's not who you are. Of course, that's part of an element of what you do and who you are, but it's not who you are. Who you are is at the core of like, what informs your values? What informs your belief systems? What is that you believe about yourself? That is exactly what I'm talking about. For example, I'll give you an example. I'm a believer in Christ. That is something that is true to my core. It informs everything that I do in my life. Everything comes back to I believe in Christ. And because I believe in Christ, this is how I model my life. My values are modeled through that. One of the things is like I'm a son. I'm a brother. I'm a lover. Like all these things are true to who I am. And all these things I can actually go down, when I write them down, I can go down and say, this is a fact, right? I have examples of showing you that I believe in Christ, for example. I have examples that show you that I'm a lover. I have loved. I continue to love on the daily. I show up to my best of my abilities as a lover. So those are things that I'm talking about. Write precisely what it is. But first of all, just let it be a brainstorm. Let it just like come out of you. What is it that you believe about yourself? After you've written down all those things, ideally I would say write down up to like 10 or 15 things. Actually, maybe 20. Write down 20 things, because we're going to just write 20 or as many things as you can write. You can set a timer for 5 minutes where you can just write everything. So this is actually what we do when we do those sessions, when we meet up with men. So this is an exercise, one of the exercises that we do on understanding self and what the self means, and the self concepts, which are beliefs and everything that you hold about yourself, which are affecting your life. And so write those 20, 30 things that you believe about yourself, And then after that, set another timer where you go through every little thing and really analyze and see whether it's fact or opinion. If you've written there that I'm unlovable because someone say that you weren't 10 years ago, and go and erase that and write something different. And in crossing those out and writing something different, my hope is that you begin to have that sense of control over your story, which is what this whole thing is all about. It's all about you reclaiming who you are and how you show up. That is why I started this podcast, because I wanted to give people the skills of understanding who they are at their core. Who are you as a man? And because if you don't understand who you are as a man, you walk around being somebody else that is not you. And the world will miss out on all the things that you're created to do. The world will miss out on the man that you're meant to be for your family, for your brothers, for your sisters, and for the person that you end up with in your life as a life partner. We don't want that. We want the world to have everything. Imagine everything that is within you that you were created to be. We want all of that to come out and to be part of the world and to be showcased. Maybe you're an artist, maybe you're an engineer, maybe you're a doctor, whatever it is. Imagine if you're created to be a doctor with all these skills, with all this knowledge, with all these wisdoms, all these beliefs and values, and you've been living as an artist. Imagine how a work-ass artist you become because you've not taken time to really understand what it is that motivates you, what it is that is at the core of why you're doing the things you're doing. So in this process, I also want to encourage you to consciously ask the question of why. I think our last episode was on talking about why. As you go through everything that you're writing down of I believe this, constantly be answering the question of why. Why do you believe that about yourself? Why do you believe that about yourself? If you believe that, no one will ever, take care of you, why do you believe that for yourself? Was it because your mom left you? Was it because your father left you? But is that true to who you are? So some of these things, because we have lived according to them for so long, they're things that inform us on the daily and we don't even know. And this is an opportunity for you to reclaim that and change the narrative. I'm hoping this exercise will be helpful for you, and I'm hoping that you gain a new skill from looking at yourself and hopefully inform your whole life with a new picture of who you are. The problem that happens in our lives is that we start off with a very clear picture of who we are. We start off with a picture of our values, our belief system that is very clear. But as lives and challenges propel us and shape us and change us, we start believing things that may not even be true to who we are. I'm hoping this exercise has helped you have a clear picture of what it is that you are. And if you haven't done this exercise because you're listening to the whole entire thing, I encourage you to go back. I'm going to repeat the steps again. The first thing you need to do is write out the definition of self, which is the belief system that you carry. It is the things that you believe about you. That is the self, which in other words, they define it as the self-concepts, which are the concepts and belief system we have about ourselves. So write that down, and then underneath that, write 20 things that you believe about yourself. Anything that you can think of, write it down. I believe this about myself. I believe I am. You can even categorize it. When we do our sessions, we usually categorize it into 5 categories, which includes spiritually, I believe I am, physically, I believe I am, mentally, I believe I am, intellectually, I believe I am, and I think the other one is socially, I believe I am. So in all those categories, you write down what you believe you are, and then we then do a truth exercise where we re-examine those things and see where you stand at the end of the day. And after that, I think that should be really helpful as you begin your journey in understanding who you are. And I hope that will also further inform how you show up in your relationships with people and with yourself. With that being said, thank you very much. I'm excited and I'm glad that I got to talk to you today. I'm hoping that this was helpful. I'm hoping that it will bring and excite something new in you and will excite a new norm and a new understanding of who you are. With that, I'll leave you for next week. Thank you. It's goodbye for now. Bye.